The neon blood crimson and electric blue across the Seoul district streets, and Brielle Jackson was already 2 blocks past him when she heard it. Not the sharp tantrum of an overtired child or the theatrical wail of a kid denied candy, but something else entirely. Something broken and terrified that didn't belong to the symphony of late-night delivery scooters and K-pop bleeding from Noribang basements. She stopped, her body screaming protest after a 16-hour double shift between 2 households. Her feet throbbed in shoes held together more by hope than leather. But she turned anyway. The boy stood frozen at the intersection like a statue drowning in light. 5, maybe 6 years old, dressed in a navy suit that cost more than Brielle made in 3 months. His small hands were clamped over his ears, his body rocking in a rhythm she recognized instantly from her certification training. His face was red and slick with tears that caught the neon and turned them into streaks of colored glass. The crowd flowed around him. Dozens of people with their eyes locked on phones, their paths curving just enough to avoid collision, but not enough to acknowledge the traumatized child melting down in the middle of their Tuesday night. Modern urban efficiency at its finest: see something, register nothing, keep moving. But Brielle had never learned how to look away from a child in pain. "Hey, sweetheart." She knelt 3 feet away, careful not to invade his space, her voice dropping to the soft register she'd perfected working with special needs children. "Can you hear me?" "Nothing." His eyes stayed squeezed shut, his small chest heaving with breaths that came too fast, too shallow. The rocking intensified, his polished shoes scraping against wet pavement. She tried Mandarin next. Years of working in diverse households had given her fragments of a dozen languages. But his distress only climbed higher, his breathing approaching hyperventilation. That's when she noticed the tag visible inside his collar when his jacket shifted. Hangul characters embroidered in silver thread. Her mind flickered back to late nights at the library, studying Korean after her elderly client Mrs. Park had taught her the alphabet between folding laundry and preparing meals. The specific breathing exercises that worked for Mrs. Park's autistic grandson. The way certain sounds, certain rhythmic patterns, could cut through sensory overload like a lifeline through fog. Brielle switched languages, her voice shifting into the gentle, melodic cadence she'd practiced until it became muscle memory. "Gwenchina. It's okay. You're safe." The boy's eyes snapped open, dark and drowning. "Chanchianhai sumul suioboja. Let's breathe slowly together." She demonstrated, her hands moving in the calming pattern, palms out, fingers spreading, then closing. The visual rhythm to anchor him. "Narangachi. Hannah, dull, set. With me. 1, 2, 3. She watched his small chest stutter, catch, then begin to match her rhythm. His hands slowly lowered from his ears, trembling. The terror in his eyes shifted, transformed. Not gone. Trauma didn't evaporate, but manageable. Present instead of drowning. "Yoonwoo," he whispered, his voice barely audible over the traffic. "I'm Yoonwoo." Something in Brielle's chest loosened, warmth spreading through the exhaustion. "Annyeonghaseyo, Yoonwoo. I'm Brielle." She didn't hear the vehicles until they were already there. Didn't register the men in midnight suits moving through the crowd with military precision until a shadow fell across them both, a presence so dense it seemed to pull oxygen from the air. Brielle looked up. The man standing above them looked like violence given human form. Tall, broad-shouldered, with sharp features that could have been carved from stone. Full-sleeve tattoos crawled from beneath rolled cuffs, intricate designs that disappeared under his black button-down. His hair was slicked back, severe and controlled. But it was his eyes that stopped her breath, dark, calculating, and currently fixed on her with an intensity that felt like being dissected. Behind him, for more men formed a wall of expensive fabric and barely contained threat. A woman's voice shattered the moment. Yoonwoo, a Korean woman in her 40s, pushed through the security wall, her face streaked with tears, relief and panic warring in her expression. But Yoonwoo didn't run to her. He looked at Brielle, uncertainty flickering across his small features, his hand tightening slightly on her sleeve. "Imo?" Brielle asked gently, keeping her voice steady. "Is that your aunt?" Yoonwoo nodded, and only then did he move, though he glanced back at Brielle twice as the woman gathered him into her arms, murmuring frantic Korean endearments. The man with the dangerous eyes hadn't moved. He studied Brielle with a focus that made her skin prickle, his gaze cataloging everything: her worn uniform, the name tag she'd forgotten to remove, the cheap canvas bag at her feet, the way her hands trembled slightly as she stood. The silence stretched. Rain drummed against the roofs of black SUVs that cost more than her annual salary. "You speak Korean." His voice was smoke and gravel, his English flawless but accented with Seoul's particular rhythm. "I do." "Where did you learn?" Brielle straightened, suddenly hyper-aware that she was surrounded, outclassed, and completely out of her depth. But she'd faced down entitled employers and landlords threatening eviction. She wouldn't cower now. "From a client. I worked as her live-in aide for 2 years. She taught me while I helped care for her grandson." Something shifted in his expression. Not softening, this man didn't soften, but a microscopic recalibration, like watching tumblers align in a lock. He glanced at Yoonwoo, who was still watching Brielle even as his aunt held him. Then back at her. "Seo Daehyun." He didn't offer his hand. It was a statement, an announcement. He expected recognition. She had none. But she nodded anyway, instinct telling her that admitting ignorance might be dangerous. "You calmed him." Not a question. Something else lived beneath the words. Disbelief, perhaps. Something that might have been wonder if this man were capable of such a thing. No one outside family has been able to do that since. He cut himself off, his jaw tightening, a muscle jumping beneath the skin. "What's your name?" "Brielle." "Brielle Jackson." Dae-hyun pulled out his phone, typed something with quick, precise movements, then looked at the man to his right. His voice dropped to a murmur, but in the relative quiet of the intersection, Brielle heard every word. Each one fell on her like a stone. Find everything about her. Where she lives, where she works, who she knows, her debts, her family, everything. His eyes returned to Brielle, and for the first time since she'd knelt beside that crying child, she felt genuine, bone-deep fear crawl up her spine. "We'll be in touch, Miss Jackson." Then they were gone, disappearing into the neon-soaked night as swiftly as they'd materialized, leaving Brielle standing alone at the intersection, her heart hammering against her ribs, rain beginning to soak through her thin jacket. She stood there for a long moment, watching the taillights of the SUVs disappear around a corner. What the hell did I just walk into? Before we dive deeper into this story, take a moment to hit that like button if you love suspenseful, emotional stories that keep you on the edge of your seat. Make sure to subscribe and turn on notifications so you don't miss the next thrilling chapter. We also want to hear from you. Drop a comment below and tell us where you're watching from. Whether it's your city, your country, or even just your favorite spot to watch these stories, we love connecting with our global audience. Now let's get back to the story and see just how far courage can take someone when danger is closing in. Brielle made it back to her efficiency apartment in Flushing on autopilot, the encounter replaying in her mind like a loop she couldn't escape. Those eyes, that voice, find everything about her. She should have felt good about helping a lost child. Should have crawled into bed satisfied that she'd done something right in a world that rarely rewarded kindness. Instead, she triple-checked her locks, tested the chain twice, and pulled out her phone with trembling fingers. Co. Daehyun, New York. The search results loaded, and Brielle's stomach dropped through the floor. The address arrived via text at 6:47 a.m. No greeting, no explanation. Just coordinates and a time. 10 a.m. sharp. The building in Tribeca looked like it could buy and sell small countries without breaking stride. Brielle stood on the sidewalk for 5 full minutes, her reflection ghosting across the steel and glass facade, before she forced herself through the revolving doors. The lobby was all marble and manufactured silence. A security guard with an earpiece and the posture of ex-military gestured toward a private elevator without asking her name, without checking a list. They already knew she was coming. The elevator ascended so smoothly she barely felt the movement, but her ears popped as the floors climbed. 20, 30, 40. The air felt thinner with each passing second, or maybe that was just the panic constricting her lungs. When the doors opened, she stepped into a penthouse that seemed designed to intimidate. The space was vast and brutally minimal, no warmth, no softness, just angles and cold light. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered a view of Manhattan that stretched to the horizon, making her feel like an ant standing before a god's throne. And there, silhouetted against all that gray morning light, stood Co. Daehyun. He didn't stand, didn't acknowledge her entrance. Just watched her walk toward him across what felt like a mile of polished concrete, her cheap shoes squeaking softly with each step, the sound obscene in the engineered silence. Brielle's mouth was dry. She could feel his eyes cataloging her every movement, every nervous gesture, every tell that betrayed her fear. The power dynamic was so obvious it might as well have been written in neon across the windows. She stopped a few feet from the desk, close enough to see the thick manila folder sitting in its center like evidence at a trial, far enough to maintain some pathetic illusion of safety. Daehyun leaned back in his chair, the leather creaking softly. The corner of his mouth curved, not quite a smile, more like a predator showing teeth. "Sit, Miss Jackson." One word. But Brielle heard the real message underneath. "You're already mine. You just don't know it yet." The address arrived via text at 6:47 a.m. No greeting, no explanation. Just coordinates and a time. 10 a.m. sharp. The building in Tribeca looked like it could buy and sell small countries without breaking stride. Brielle stood on the sidewalk for 5 full minutes, her reflection ghosting across the steel and glass facade, before she forced herself through the revolving doors. The lobby was all marble and manufactured silence. A security guard with an earpiece and the posture of ex-military gestured toward a private elevator without asking her name, without checking a list. They already knew she was coming. The elevator ascended so smoothly she barely felt the movement, but her ears popped as the floors climbed. 20, 30, 40. The air felt thinner with each passing second, or maybe that was just the panic constricting her lungs. When the doors opened, she stepped into a penthouse that seemed designed to intimidate. The space was vast and brutally minimal, no warmth, no softness, just angles and cold light. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered a view of Manhattan that stretched to the horizon, making her feel like an ant standing before a god's throne. And there, silhouetted against all that gray morning light, stood Co. Daehyun. He didn't stand, didn't acknowledge her entrance. Just watched her walk toward him across what felt like a mile of polished concrete, her cheap shoes squeaking softly with each step, the sound obscene in the engineered silence. Brielle's mouth was dry. She could feel his eyes cataloging her every movement, every nervous gesture, every tell that betrayed her fear. The power dynamic was so obvious it might as well have been written in neon across the windows. She stopped a few feet from the desk, close enough to see the thick manila folder sitting in its center like evidence at a trial, far enough to maintain some pathetic illusion of safety. Dae-hyun leaned back in his chair, the leather creaking softly. The corner of his mouth curved, not quite a smile, more like a predator showing teeth. "Sit, Miss Jackson." One word. But Brielle heard the real message underneath. "You're already mine. You just don't know it yet." The contract signing happened in a different location, a private office in Koreatown that smelled of leather and old money. Dae-hyun was already there when she arrived, standing by floor-to-ceiling windows that overlooked a street market 3 stories below. He didn't turn when she entered, just watched her reflection in the glass. "You came. You knew I would." Brielle kept her voice steady, refusing to let him hear the fear threading through her veins. "I suspected." He turned then, and the morning light cut across his face, making the sharp angles even more severe. "But people surprise me sometimes. Usually by being more foolish than I anticipate." "Is accepting your offer foolish?" "That depends entirely on whether you understand what you're agreeing to." He gestured to the conference table where a stack of documents waited, each page marked with neon tabs. "Sit. Read every word. I won't have you claiming ignorance later." Brielle sat, pulling the contract closer. The salary was there exactly as promised, $200,000 annually, paid monthly. Housing provided in the east wing of his private residence. Medical, dental, vision. A clothing allowance that made her throat tight. It looked like salvation printed in Arial font. Then she reached page 4, and her stomach dropped. 24-hour security detail? She looked up, finding Dae-hyun watching her with that unreadable expression. "You want to assign bodyguards to follow me everywhere?" "Not want, Miss Jackson. Require." He moved to the table, his presence filling the space beside her. "The moment you accept this position, you become a target. My enemies will see you as leverage against me. Against Yunwoo. Your enemies." The words felt surreal in her mouth. "What exactly do you do, Mr. CEO?" "Import and export." His smile was winter cold. "Among other things." "That's not an answer." "It's the only answer you need." He leaned down, one hand flat on the table, bringing his face level with hers. "Here's what matters. People will try to hurt you to hurt me. They will try to use you to get to my son. So you will have protection. Non-negotiable." Brielle forced herself to hold his gaze, even though every instinct screamed to look away. "I can't live like that. I can't have men following me to the grocery store, the laundromat." "You won't be going to the laundromat." His voice was silk over steel. "You'll be living in my home. Your needs will be provided for. Your safety will be absolute." He straightened, adjusting his cuffs with precise movements. "These aren't suggestions, Miss Jackson. They're the terms. Accept them or walk away now." She looked back at the contract, her eyes scanning further. No unauthorized visitors without prior approval. No sharing details of her employment or location with anyone outside a pre-approved contact list. No leaving the property without security escort. A non-disclosure agreement, so ironclad it made her head spin. It wasn't a job offer. It was ownership. "You're buying me." The words came out flat, factual. "I'm protecting you." Dae-hyun sat across from her, his posture relaxed but his eyes sharp. "There's a difference, though. I understand why you can't see it yet. In 6 months, you'll thank me for these precautions. In a year, you won't be able to imagine living any other way." "That's what scares me." Something flickered across his face. Not quite respect, but close. "Good. Fear will keep you smart. Complacency will get you killed." He slid a pen across the table. "Last chance, Miss Jackson. Sign and your old life ends today. Walk away and you never hear from me again. Choose." Brielle's hand hovered over the pen. She thought about her efficiency apartment with its broken heater, about the collection notices stuffed in her mailbox, about her mother's grave she couldn't afford to visit. She thought about working herself to death before 40, just like her mother had. Then she thought about Yoonwoo's face, tear-streaked and terrified, his small voice whispering his name in Korean. A little boy who needed someone to see him, to reach him in the darkness where trauma had locked him away. Her fingers closed around the pen. The contract required her signature in 12 places. Each one felt like a door closing, a lock clicking shut. By the time she reached the final page, her hand was shaking so badly the signature looked nothing like her usual handwriting. It looked like surrender. Dae-hyun collected the documents with efficient movements, sliding them into a folder. Your apartment will be cleared out by tomorrow evening. Anything you want kept will be moved to your new quarters. Everything else will be disposed of. Just like that, Brielle's voice came out hollow. My whole life, just erased? Your old life, he corrected. The one that was killing you slowly. He stood, buttoning his suit jacket. A car is waiting downstairs. It will take you to the estate. Your security detail is already in place. 2 men rotating shifts. Their names are Chun and Park. They're former military, highly trained, and utterly loyal. Get used to them. When do I start with Yoonwoo? Today. For the first time, something human crossed his face, a flash of vulnerability, so quick she almost missed it. He's been asking about you. The woman who spoke his language. Dae-hyun moved toward the door, then paused. Don't make me regret this, Miss Jackson. I'm trusting you with the only thing in this world that matters to me. Betray that trust, and protection won't save you. It wasn't a threat. It was a promise. Brielle watched him leave, his footsteps echoing in the empty hallway. She sat alone in the silence, staring at her hands, at the fingers that had just signed away her freedom for a chance at survival. The lock had clicked shut. There was no going back now. She was his. The estate was obscene in its wealth. Brielle's quarters in the East Wing were larger than her entire apartment had been. Bedroom, sitting area, private bathroom with heated floors, and a soaking tub that could fit 3 people. The closet was already stocked with clothes in her exact size, tags still attached. Someone had measured her without her knowing, cataloged her body like inventory. She didn't unpack. Couldn't bring herself to make it feel permanent yet. Instead, she found Yoonwoo's room. It was at the end of the hallway, distinguished by the complete absence of sound. No television, no music, no voices. Just silence so thick it felt like walking into water. Chun, her shadow for the day's shift, stopped outside the door. He doesn't come out much, Chun said quietly. His English was accented but precise. The previous caregivers, they didn't last long. How many have there been? 7. In 2 years. His expression was carefully neutral. Mr. Seo has high standards. Or a son so traumatized that no one knew how to reach him. Brielle knocked softly, then entered without waiting for an answer she knew wouldn't come. The room was beautiful and sterile. Expensive toys lined shelves, still in their packaging. A bed shaped like a race car sat untouched, the comforter military crisp. And in the corner, curled in a reading nook by the window, was Yoonwoo. He looked smaller than he had on the street, more fragile. He was wearing soft clothes now, gray sweatpants and a white t-shirt, but his body held the same rigidity, the same tension of a child bracing for impact. He didn't look up when she entered. Brielle didn't speak. Not yet. She simply sat on the floor, 10 feet away, and pulled out the items she'd requested that morning. A wooden puzzle, smooth and tactile. She began working on it, her movements slow and deliberate, the soft click of pieces fitting together the only sound in the room. 5 minutes passed. 10. Then, so quietly she almost missed it, Yunwoo shifted. His head turned, just slightly, his eyes tracking her hands. Johi? Brielle asked softly, not looking at him directly. Do you like puzzles? Silence. But he was watching now, his body angled toward her. She continued working, narrating her process in simple Korean. This piece goes here. Blue with blue. The sky is always blue in puzzles, isn't it? Even when real sky is gray. Another minute. Then Yunwoo uncurled slightly, his feet touching the floor. Brielle's heart hammered, but she kept her movement steady, unthreatening. She pushed a puzzle piece toward him, letting it rest halfway between them. This one looks lonely. I think it belongs near the tree. Yunwoo stared at the piece. His small hand twitched. You don't have to, Brielle said gently. But if you want to help, I'd like that. The silence stretched so long she thought she'd miscalculated. Then Yunwoo stood, his movements jerky and uncertain. He crossed the space between them, picked up the piece, and, with trembling fingers, placed it in the puzzle. It fit perfectly. Perfect, Brielle breathed. You're so good at this. Yunwoo sat down beside her. Not close, but closer. And together, in silence punctuated only by the soft clicks of wood on wood, they built a landscape. It took 3 days before he spoke. They were in the garden, Brielle reading aloud from a Korean picture book while Yunwoo examined smooth river stones she'd collected. The sun was warm, the air smelled of jasmine, and for a moment, the world felt almost normal. Yeputa, Yunwoo whispered. Brielle's breath caught. Beautiful. He'd said beautiful. She looked up slowly, afraid sudden movement would shatter the moment. The stones? He nodded, his fingers tracing the patterns in the rock. Then, so quietly she had to lean in to hear. Iyama liked stones. Pretty ones. Iyama. Mother. Tears burned behind Brielle's eyes, but she blinked them back. She had good taste. These are very pretty. She paused, weighing her words carefully. Do you want to collect more? We could make a special box for them. Yunwoo looked at her then, really looked at her, and nodded. That evening, she heard him laugh for the first time. They were building a tower with blocks, seeing how high they could stack before it fell. Brielle had deliberately made hers wobbly, and when it crashed with an exaggerated clatter, she'd thrown her hands up in mock despair. Ego. My tower. And Yunwoo laughed. It was small, barely more than a breath, but it was real. His whole face transformed, the tension melting, his eyes crinkling, his mouth curving into something that looked almost like joy. The sound carried through the open door into the hallway where 3 household staff members had been passing. They froze, their faces registering shock so complete it would have been comical in any other context. Mrs. Kong, the head housekeeper, pressed a hand to her mouth. That's the young master? He laughed, whispered Minji, one of the maids. I've worked here 18 months. I've never heard him laugh. But Brielle barely registered them. She was watching Yunwoo, watching him stack another block with hands that shook less now, watching him glance at her with something that might have been trust. Want to try again? She asked in Korean. Yunwoo nodded, and this time, when her tower fell, he giggled, a fuller sound, more confident. Brielle didn't notice Daehyun standing in the doorway, his expression unreadable as he watched his son experience something he'd thought was lost forever. Didn't see the way his hand gripped the doorframe, knuckles white, or the way his jaw tightened against emotions he couldn't afford to name. She only saw Yunwoo, alive and present and laughing. And for the first time since signing that contract, Brielle thought maybe, just maybe, she'd made the right choice. Even if it cost her everything. Brielle felt him before she saw him. A shift in the air, a weight of attention that made the hair on her neck rise. She'd been singing to Yoonwoo, a Korean lullaby Mrs. Park had taught her years ago, when the sensation crawled up her spine. She turned her head slightly, and there he was, Dae-hyun, standing in the doorway of the sunroom, his shoulder against the frame. Not hiding anymore, just watching. Their eyes met, and he didn't look away. Yoonwoo didn't notice. He was curled against Brielle's side on the window seat, his small body relaxed in a way that still felt miraculous after 2 weeks. His eyes were half closed, his breathing evening out as her voice washed over him. Dae-hyun stayed until the song ended, until Yoonwoo's eyes closed completely and his hand loosened its grip on Brielle's sleeve. Then, without a word, he turned and disappeared down the hallway, his footsteps silent on marble floors. It became a pattern. He was there during breakfast, leaning against the kitchen doorway while Yoonwoo carefully spread jam on toast, his tongue peeking out in concentration. Brielle had taught him to do it himself, to trust his own hands, and the pride on the boy's face when he finished was incandescent. Dae-hyun's expression revealed nothing, but his fingers tapped against his crossed arms, once, twice, before he left. He was there during art therapy in the garden, standing beneath the pergola's shadow while Brielle and Yoonwoo painted rocks with watercolors. Yoonwoo had started talking more, short sentences in Korean about colors and shapes, and the butterfly that landed on his knee. Appa. Yoonwoo had called out suddenly, holding up a painted stone. Look. Blue like sky. Dae-hyun had gone utterly still. Then he'd walked forward, crouched down to Yoonwoo's level, and examined the stone with the same intensity he gave multi-million-dollar deals. Beautiful, he'd said, his voice rough. Like Yuriyama's eyes. Yoonwoo had smiled and gone back to painting. But Brielle had seen the way Dae-hyun's hand trembled before he stood and walked away. By the 3rd week, he stopped pretending he had other reasons to be there. He would simply appear. In doorways, at the edge of rooms, sometimes sitting in chairs positioned just outside the direct flow of activity. Watching. Always watching. His dark eyes tracked every movement Brielle made, how she knelt to meet Yoonwoo at eye level, how she waited for the boy to come to her rather than forcing proximity, how she celebrated small victories without overwhelming him with praise. It should have felt invasive, should have made her angry. Instead, it made her hyper-aware of her own body, her own movements, of the way his gaze felt like a physical touch trailing across her skin. She was reading to Yoonwoo one evening, both of them sprawled on the playroom floor, when she felt that familiar weight of attention. She didn't look up, but her voice faltered for just a syllable. Keep going, Dae-hyun said from somewhere behind her. Not a command, but close. Brielle continued, hyper-conscious now of his presence, of the way he moved closer, settling into an armchair within her peripheral vision. Close enough that she could see him in the lamplight, sleeves rolled up, tattoos dark against his forearms, his posture deceptively relaxed. When Yoonwoo fell asleep 20 minutes later, his head pillowed on a stuffed elephant, Brielle carefully extracted herself and reached for a blanket. Strong hands got there first. Dae-hyun draped the blanket over his son with movements so gentle they seemed impossible from hands she knew were capable of violence. His fingers lingered on Yoonwoo's hair, smoothing it back from his forehead. He never slept well, Dae-hyun said quietly, still looking at Yoonwoo. After. He'd wake up screaming. 4, 5 times a night. He paused. Last night, he slept through until morning. Brielle stood carefully, aware of how close they were now. Close enough to see the exhaustion carved into the lines around his eyes. He feels safe. Because of you. Dae-hyun looked at her then, and the intensity in his gaze made her breath catch. You gave him something back I thought was lost forever. I'm just helping him process trauma, giving him tools. You're giving him his childhood back.
His voice was low, raw.
Do you understand what that means to me? What I would do to protect that? The air between them felt charged, dangerous. Brielle should step back, should maintain professional distance. But she couldn't move. Mr. Seo. Dae-hyun. He said it like a correction, like an order. When it's just us, you call me Dae-hyun. That's not appropriate. Nothing about this situation is appropriate, Miss Jackson. He moved closer, not touching but near enough that she could feel his body heat. I hired you to save my son. I'm watching you succeed. And every day I watch you with him, I see what I couldn't see before. What's that? His eyes searched her face, lingering on her lips before meeting her gaze again. Why he chose you. On that street, surrounded by dozens of people. Why you? Brielle's heart hammered against her ribs. He didn't choose me. I was just the one who stopped.
No.
Dae-hyun's hand lifted, hesitated, then fell back to his side. The restraint in that aborted gesture was somehow more intimate than if he'd touched her. You are the one who saw him.
Really saw him.
Not a problem to fix or a duty to fulfill. Just a scared child who needed someone to care. His phone buzzed, shattering the moment. Dae-hyun pulled it out, glanced at the screen, and his expression shuddered closed like blast doors slamming down. Whatever he'd been about to say dissolved into the practiced coldness she recognized from their first meeting. Chin will escort you to your quarters. He was already moving toward the door, toward whatever crisis required his attention. But he paused at the threshold, looking back. Thank you. For my son. Then he was gone, leaving Brielle standing in the lamplight, her skin still tingling from a touch that never happened. She looked down at Yoonwoo, sleeping peacefully, and wondered what she'd gotten herself into. Because the danger she'd feared from Dae-hyun's world suddenly seemed less threatening than what was building between them in quiet moments and weighted silences. Something neither of them could afford. Something neither of them seemed able to stop. The invitation came at midnight. Not through Chun or Park, not through the household staff. Dae-hyun himself, standing in her doorway like a shadow given form. Come with me. Brielle should have said no. Should have reminded him of boundaries, of professional lines that were already blurring beyond recognition. But something in his expression stopped her, a rawness she'd never seen before, like watching a man bleed through his armor. She followed him through the silent mansion, their footsteps muffled by expensive rugs. He led her past the main living areas, down a hallway she'd never been permitted to enter, to a door at the very end that looked different from the others. Older. The wood was dark with age, the handle tarnished brass that hadn't been polished in years. Dae-hyun's hand hesitated on the handle. No one comes here. Not the staff. Not family. He looked at her, his eyes holding a question he wouldn't voice. Just me. He opened the door. The conservatory was breathtaking and heartbreaking in equal measure. Glass walls curved overhead, revealing the night sky scattered with stars. But it was the inside that made Brielle's throat tight. Plants everywhere, some thriving, some dying, some long dead but still standing in their pots like monuments. A piano sat in the corner, sheet music scattered across its surface, edges curled with time. Photographs lined the windowsills, and in every single one, a beautiful Korean woman smiled with eyes that looked exactly like Yoonwoo's. She loved growing things. Dae-hyun's voice was barely above a whisper. Said it reminded her that beautiful things could survive in harsh conditions if you just gave them enough care. He moved to one of the plants, an orchid with pale pink blooms. His fingers touched the petals with impossible gentleness. I keep them alive. The ones I can. It's the least I can do. Brielle walked deeper into the space, her eyes taking in the intimate details, a sweater draped over a chair, a pair of reading glasses on a side table, a half-finished painting on an easel. It was a shrine disguised as a room. Her name was Jiwoo, Dae-hyun said. He picked up one of the photographs, the woman holding a newborn Yoonwoo, her face radiant with exhausted joy. She was an artist. A good one. She could have been famous if she'd wanted, but she said fame was just noise. She preferred quiet things. Beautiful things. His jaw tightened. She deserved quiet. I gave her war. What happened? Brielle asked softly. Dae-hyun set the photo down carefully, as if it might shatter. I have enemies. Men who see family as weakness, as leverage. He turned to face her, and the pain in his eyes was so raw it felt obscene to witness. They came to our home. A Saturday afternoon. Jiwoo was in the garden with Yoonwoo. He was playing in the fountain, and she was reading. His hands curled into fists. I was in Seoul, handling business. I should have been there. Dae-hyun. They shot her. The words came out flat, factual, but his body vibrated with barely controlled fury. In front of our son. She was trying to protect him, covering his body with hers. They shot her twice in the chest and left her bleeding on the grass while Yoonwoo screamed. Brielle's hand flew to her mouth, nausea rising in her throat. Oh my God. By the time I got there, she was already gone. Dae-hyun's voice cracked, just slightly, before he wrestled it back under control. Yoonwoo was still holding her hand. He wouldn't let go, wouldn't speak, wouldn't cry, just sat there in her blood, staring at nothing. The silence that followed was suffocating. Brielle didn't know what to say. There were no words adequate for that kind of loss, that kind of trauma. I killed them. Dae-hyun said it simply, without inflection. Every single man involved. It took me 3 months to hunt them all down, but I made sure they understood exactly what they'd taken from me before they died. He looked at her then, and his eyes were empty. Does that frighten you? It should have. But all Brielle felt was a crushing sadness for the man standing in front of her, surrounded by his dead wife's things, trying to keep her memory alive through dying plants and dust. It breaks my heart, she said honestly. Something shifted in his expression. You should be afraid of me. I'm afraid of what was done to you. To Yoonwoo. To your wife. Brielle took a step closer. But I'm not afraid of you. You should be. His voice was rough. I'm not a good man, Brielle. I've done things that would make you run screaming. The only good thing I've ever created is sleeping upstairs, and I failed to protect him from the one thing that mattered. You didn't fail him. You survived for him. She closed the distance between them, standing close enough to see the exhaustion carved into every line of his face. And you're protecting him now. You brought me here to help him heal. I brought you here because I'm selfish. Dae-hyun's hand lifted, his fingers grazing her cheek so lightly she might have imagined it. Because watching you with my son makes me believe in things I thought died with Jiwoo. Hope. Softness. The possibility that good things can survive in darkness. His thumb traced her jawline, and Brielle's breath caught. She should step back. Should remember that this man was her employer, that she was here for Yoonwoo, that crossing this line would complicate everything. But his eyes held so much pain, so much loneliness, that stepping away felt like cruelty. Dae-hyun, she whispered. Tell me to stop. His forehead nearly touched hers, his breath warm against her skin. Tell me this is wrong, and I'll walk away. I'll never touch you again. Brielle's heart hammered so hard, she was certain he could hear it. Every rational thought screamed at her to end this now, to protect herself, to remember the power imbalance and the danger, and all the reasons this was a terrible idea. But his wife's photographs watched from the windowsills, and the plants she'd loved were dying despite his best efforts, and upstairs a little boy was finally sleeping peacefully because someone had cared enough to see him. And this man, dangerous, broken, and desperately alone, was looking at her like she was the first light he'd seen in 2 years of darkness. "I can't," Brielle breathed. "I can't tell you to stop." The last thread of his control snapped. His mouth crashed into hers with 2 years of grief and hunger and desperate need. There was nothing gentle about it, nothing careful. His hands cupped her face like she might disappear if he loosened his grip, his fingers threading into her hair, tilting her head back to deepen the kiss. Brielle gasped against his lips, and he swallowed the sound, his body pressing her backward until her spine met the cool glass of the conservatory wall. The contrast, his heat against her front, the cold glass against her back, made her dizzy.
She should stop this.
Should push him away, remind him of contracts and professional boundaries and all the reasons this was catastrophic. Instead, her hands fisted in his shirt, pulling him closer. Dae-hyun made a sound low in his throat, something between a growl and surrender. His lips moved from her mouth to her jaw, trailing fire down the column of her neck. "Tell me no," he murmured against her skin, his voice wrecked. "Brielle, tell me to stop." "I can't." Her head fell back, giving him access, her fingers sliding up to grip his shoulders. The muscles beneath her palms were taut, trembling with restraint. "I can't." "You should." His teeth grazed her pulse point, and she felt him smile against her throat when she moaned. "You should run from me. From this." Too late. Brielle pulled his face back to hers, kissing him with a hunger that surprised them both. She poured everything into it. Weeks of watching him watch her, nights of lying awake thinking about his hands, the weight of attraction that had been building like pressure behind a dam. The dam broke. Dae-hyun's hands slid down her sides, his touch branding her through the thin fabric of her sleep shirt. He gripped her hips, lifting her slightly, and she wrapped her legs around his waist instinctively. The position pressed them together intimately, and the groan that tore from his chest was ragged, almost pained. "Do you understand what you're doing to me?" His forehead pressed against hers, his breathing harsh. "What you've been doing to me since the moment you spoke Korean to my son in the middle of that street?" "Show me." Brielle's fingers traced the edge of the tattoos on his forearms, feeling his muscles jump beneath her touch. "Stop talking and show me." His eyes went dark, pupils blown wide. Then he was kissing her again, slower this time, but no less intense. His tongue traced the seam of her lips until she opened for him, and the kiss turned deep, searching, devastating. He kissed her like he was trying to memorize her, like he was drowning and she was air. Brielle's world narrowed to sensation, the taste of him, the solid weight of his body, the way his hands explored her with a reverence that made her chest ache. This wasn't just attraction. It was something bigger, more dangerous. Recognition. Like two broken pieces discovering they fit together in ways that shouldn't be possible. Brielle. Her name on his lips was prayer and curse. He pulled back just enough to look at her, his hands framing her face with impossible gentleness. "If we do this, there's no going back. Do you understand? I won't be able to let you go." The warning should have terrified her. Should have snapped her back to reality, to the fact that she worked for him, that he owned her contract, that she'd signed her freedom away. But all she saw was the vulnerability in his eyes, the way his hands trembled slightly against her cheeks, the desperate need of a man who'd convinced himself he'd never feel anything again. "Then don't." She kissed him softly, a promise. "Don't let me go." Something broke open in his expression. He kissed her again, and this time there was something almost tender beneath the hunger. His hands roamed her body with increasing urgency, finding the hem of her shirt, his fingers burning against the bare skin of her lower back. A sound echoed from somewhere in the house, a door closing, footsteps in a distant hallway. Reality crashed back in. They froze, both breathing hard, still tangled together. Brielle's legs were still wrapped around his waist, her fingers still buried in his hair. The spell broke slowly, reluctantly. Dae-hyun lowered her carefully to her feet, but he didn't step back. His hands lingered on her waist, his forehead resting against hers as they both tried to catch their breath. "This is insane," Brielle whispered. "I know." His thumb traced circles on her hip, a gesture at odds with the intensity of moments before. "I knew at the moment I ordered my men to find you. I knew you'd ruin me." "Ruin you?" She pulled back slightly to look at him. "You're the one with all the power here."
No.
His eyes searched hers, and the naked honesty in them stole her breath. "You had all the power from the beginning. You just didn't know it yet." He brushed a strand of hair from her face, his touch achingly gentle. "My son adores you. And I." He paused, his jaw tightening. "I need you. Not just for Yunwoo. For me." The confession hung between them, more intimate than the kisses had been. "Dae-hyun. Don't." He pressed a finger to her lips. "Don't think about all the reasons this is wrong. Not tonight. Just." His thumb traced her bottom lip, his eyes following the movement with barely restrained hunger. "Just tell me you want this too. That I'm not alone in this madness." Brielle caught his hand, pressing a kiss to his palm. She felt him shudder at the touch. "You're not alone." He pulled her into his arms then, holding her close, his face buried in her hair. The embrace was more intense than the passion had been. Two people clinging to something they knew was fragile, precious, and probably doomed. When they finally pulled apart, the professional lines between them had been incinerated. There was no employer and employee anymore. No mafia boss and hired help. Just two people who'd found something unexpected and terrifying in each other's brokenness. "Go," Dae-hyun said softly, though his hands were still on her. "Before I forget every reason, I should let you walk away." Brielle nodded, stepping back on unsteady legs. She made it to the door before she looked back. He stood silhouetted against the glass walls, surrounded by his dead wife's plants and memories, looking at Brielle like she was the only living thing in a room full of ghosts. "This changes everything," she said. "I know." His smile was slight, sad. "It already has." She left him there in the conservatory, but she felt his gaze following her all the way down the dark hallway. And when she finally made it back to her room, her lips still swollen from his kisses, her body still humming with want, she knew with absolute certainty that she'd crossed a line there was no uncrossing. She was his, but more terrifying, he was hers too. And neither of them had any idea what that would cost. Brielle woke to silence. Not the peaceful kind, the wrong kind. The kind that made her skin prickle even before she understood why. Yunwoo's bed was empty. She was on her feet before conscious thought caught up, her heart already hammering. 3 months in this house had rewired her instincts. She knew his patterns, his hiding spots, the specific quality of his breathing when he slept. She moved through the darkened hallway on silent feet, past the nightlights they'd installed at careful intervals, her mind cataloging possibilities. The library, the conservatory, the kitchen where Cook left rice crackers in the blue tin he could reach. But she found him somewhere else entirely. Yunwoo sat on the landing of the main staircase, small and still in his dinosaur pajamas, his hands pressed over his ears. Not the tight, panicked press of a meltdown, the careful, deliberate press of a child trying to block out something he shouldn't be hearing. Brielle's stomach dropped.
She heard it then.
Voices from Dae-hyun's study below, low and sharp. Korean, rapid fire and vicious. She should have scooped Yunwoo up immediately. Should have carried him back to his room, tucked him in, sung the stupid dinosaur song he loved. Should have protected him from whatever was happening downstairs. But she heard her own name. You've lost your mind over this Brielle woman. The voice belonged to Dae-hyun's uncle, the one who visited monthly to review finances, whose presence always made the household staff move faster. The words came fast and cutting in Korean, but Brielle understood every syllable. Brielle knelt beside Yunwoo, her hand finding his small shoulder, but she didn't move him. Not yet. She couldn't. Be careful. Dae-hyun's voice, cold as winter steel. You're crossing a line. What line? A bitter laugh. She'll end up like Sujin. Exactly the same way. The silence that followed felt like a hell breath. Like the moment before a car crash when time stretches and you see everything coming but can't stop it. Shut your mouth. Dae-hyun's voice dropped to something lethal.
Why?
It's the truth. The uncle's voice turned poisonous. Sujin tried to leave too. It was betrayal. She was a liability. We had no choice but to eliminate her. You know this. You gave the order. The world tilted. Brielle's hand tightened on Yunwoo's shoulder. The boy leaned into her slightly, his small body trembling, and she realized with sick certainty that he understood. Maybe not every word, but enough. The tone. The name.
Sujin.
His mother. It was for Yunwoo. Dae-hyun's voice cracked, just slightly, a hairline fracture in steel. She was going to take him. My son. Leave the organization with him. And this woman will do the same. The uncle spat the words like venom. You're falling in love with her. I see it. And she'll want to leave too. Everyone wants to leave eventually. Brielle is different. You thought Sujin was different too. Something shattered. Glass, maybe. A whiskey tumbler against a wall. Get out. Dae-hyun's command was absolute.
Right now.
Don't ever say her name again. Footsteps. Heavy, angry, coming toward the hallway. Brielle moved on pure instinct. She scooped Yunwoo into her arms. He came willingly, his small hands clutching her shirt, and ran. Not to his bedroom. Not to hers. To the only place she could think of. The conservatory. Dae-hyun's late wife's sanctuary. The room he'd shown her in a moment of manufactured vulnerability. The room with the door that locked from the inside. She made it just as the uncle's footsteps echoed in the main hall. She locked the door with shaking hands, then sank to the floor with Yunwoo still in her arms. The boy's face was wet. Silent tears. The kind he'd cried that first night on the neon-lit street. His dark eyes found hers in the moonlight filtering through the glass ceiling. Iyama, he whispered. The Korean word for mother. Not calling for her. Naming her. Understanding what he'd just heard. I know, baby. Brielle's voice cracked. I know. She'd believed him. Every word. The grief in his voice when he'd told her about Sujin's murder. The way his hands had trembled when he showed her the conservatory, the space his wife had loved. The incomplete confession that first night. No one has been able to calm him since. Since what? Since we killed her. Since I ordered it. The kiss they'd shared 3 days ago still burned on her lips. The way he'd looked at her after, like she was something sacred, something worth protecting. The careful way he'd cupped her face, his tattooed hands so gentle. The whispered promise. I won't let anything happen to you. All of it. Every moment. Built on a lie. Not a murder committed by enemies. Not a tragedy beyond his control. An execution. Ordered because Sujin wanted to leave, wanted to take her son away from this life. Because she'd become a liability. Brielle held Yunwoo tighter, her mind racing through implications like a wildfire through dry grass. The contract she'd signed. The 24-hour security, that had felt like protection. The manila folder with every vulnerability cataloged. The uncle's words, "She'll want to leave too. Everyone wants to leave eventually." And what happened to liabilities in Seo Dae-hyun's world? She already knew the answer. She was holding him in her arms, the living evidence of what happened when someone tried to leave. The boy who'd watched his mother die. The boy who hadn't spoken for 2 years because trauma had stolen his voice. The boy she'd just started to save. Moonlight painted silver across the conservatory floor. Yoonwoo's breathing gradually steadied against her chest. Outside, the Manhattan skyline glittered like broken glass. Beautiful and sharp and dangerous. Brielle pressed her lips to the top of Yoonwoo's head and made a choice. Not yet. Not tonight. But soon, she would have to decide. Run and lose him forever, or stay and become another liability waiting to be eliminated. The door handle turned. Tested. Found locked. Brielle. Dae-hyun's voice, low and steady through the wood. Not angry. Careful. Like he was approaching a wounded animal. Open the door. She closed her eyes, tightened her arms around the boy who'd become hers, and said nothing at all. They stayed in the conservatory until dawn. Yoonwoo eventually fell asleep against her chest, his small body finally surrendering to exhaustion. Brielle didn't sleep. She watched the sky lighten through the glass ceiling, watched the city wake up beyond the mansion's walls, and felt the weight of her choice settling into her bones. When the door finally unlocked, Dae-hyun must have retrieved the master key. She wasn't surprised. She'd known he would come. Known he wouldn't let this silence stretch forever. He stood in the doorway, still wearing last night's clothes, his tattooed arms bare and his expression carefully blank. Not the cold fury she'd expected. Not the dangerous intensity that usually radiated from him like heat. Just exhaustion. And something else. Something that looked almost like fear. "Give him to me." His voice was quiet. "I'll put him back to bed." Brielle's arms tightened instinctively around the sleeping child. Dae-hyun noticed. Of course he did. He noticed everything. "I'm not going to hurt him, Brielle. He's my son. You hurt his mother." The words came out flat. Factual. She was past tears, past shock. She'd burned through every emotion in the long night and arrived at something harder. Clearer. Dae-hyun's jaw tightened, but he didn't deny it. Didn't offer excuses or explanations. He simply held out his arms and waited. She stood slowly, her muscles screaming from hours on the floor, and transferred Yoonwoo's weight to his father. The boy stirred but didn't wake, his small hand fisting in Dae-hyun's black shirt. For a moment, watching them together, Brielle saw it. The fierce protectiveness in the way Dae-hyun cradled his son, the gentleness that lived beneath all that violence. It made everything worse. "My office," Dae-hyun said. 20 minutes. We need to talk." She almost laughed. Talk. As if words could fix this. As if there was any conversation that could bridge the gap between who she'd thought he was and what he'd actually done. But she nodded. Because she needed answers. Because she needed to know what happened next. Because Yoonwoo was still sleeping in his father's arms, and she couldn't just run without understanding all the pieces on the board. 20 minutes later, she stood in his office. The same space where she'd first sat across from him, terrified and broke and desperate. The manila folder was gone now, replaced by something else. A black leather portfolio, and a single sheet of paper. Dae-hyun sat behind his desk, looking like he hadn't slept in days. Maybe he hadn't. His fingers drummed once against the mahogany surface, then stilled. Control reimposed. "I'm going to give you a choice," he said. "And I need you to understand that I'm only offering it once." How generous. The bitterness in her voice surprised even her. His eyes flickered. You can leave.
Today. Right now.
I'll pay you $5 million. Enough to clear every debt, buy a house, start over anywhere in the world. You'll sign an NDA, agree to never contact Yunwoo again, and you'll be free. Completely free. The number was staggering. Life-changing. The kind of money that could erase every mistake, every bad choice, every desperate moment that had led her to that neon-lit street 3 months ago. Or, her voice didn't shake. She was proud of that. Or you stay. Dae-hyun stood, moving around the desk with predatory grace. He stopped 3 feet away, close enough that she could see the shadows under his eyes, the tension in his shoulders. You stay knowing exactly what I am, what I've done, what I'm capable of doing. No more lies, Brielle. No more pretty stories about tragic accidents or enemy attacks. You stay knowing I ordered my wife's death because she tried to take my son from me. You stay knowing that I run an organization built on violence and fear and blood. You stay knowing that I will do anything, and I mean anything, to protect what's mine. And Yunwoo. She forced the words past the tightness in her throat. What happens to him if I leave? He'll survive. Dae-hyun's voice was cold, clinical. He survived before you came. He'll have therapists, caregivers, every resource money can buy. He'll have me. He'll be safe. He'll be broken. Brielle took a step toward him, fury finally cutting through her shock. You know what I've built with him. You've seen him laugh. You've heard him talk about his day at dinner. You've watched him start to heal. And you're asking me to walk away from that for money? I'm asking you to save yourself. Something cracked in his composure. I'm asking you to take the out I'm giving you before you become. He cut himself off, turning away. Before I become a liability. She said it for him. Said the word that had been circling her mind all night like a vulture. Before I try to leave and you have to eliminate me too? The silence that followed was suffocating. Yes. He said it so quietly she almost missed it. When he turned back, his expression was raw, unguarded. I'm falling in love with you, Brielle. And I don't know how to do that without destroying you. Everyone I love ends up, his hands clenched into fists. Take the money. Disappear. Hate me forever. But live.
No.
The word hung in the air between them like a thrown knife. Dae-hyun's eyes widened slightly. What?
No.
Brielle's voice was steady now.
Certain.
I'm not leaving Yunwoo. Not for $5 million. Not for $50 million. That little boy upstairs needs me, and I'll be damned if I let your guilt or your fear or your twisted sense of protection make me abandon him. You don't understand what you're choosing. Dae-hyun's voice dropped to something dangerous. You think you can stay and fix us? Save the broken child and redeem the monster? This isn't a fairy tale, Brielle.
I can't be saved. I don't want to be saved.
I'm not trying to save you. She closed the distance between them, looked up into those dark, lethal eyes. I'm staying for Yunwoo. But here's the truth you need to hear. You're not the only one who decides what happens in this house anymore. You're not the only one with power over that child's life. I'm staying, Dae-hyun. And you're going to have to accept that I'm not your employee anymore. I'm not your possession. I'm choosing this cage, but I'm choosing it on my terms. For a long moment, he just stared at her. Then something shifted in his expression. Not softness, never that, but recognition. Respect, maybe. The acknowledgement that she'd just moved a piece on the board he hadn't expected. You're insane. But there was something almost like wonder in his voice. Probably. Brielle didn't smile. But I'm staying. So you'd better figure out how to live with someone who knows exactly what you are and isn't afraid to fight you for that little boy's soul. Dae-hyun reached out slowly, his tattooed hand cupping her face with devastating gentleness. You're going to hate me eventually. You know that, right? I already hate you. Her voice was steady, truthful. But I love him more than I hate you. So we're going to make this work. Somehow.
He kissed her then.
Not gentle. Not sweet. Acclaiming. A warning. A promise of everything dark and complicated that lay ahead. When he pulled back, his thumb traced her cheekbone. The cage has locks on both sides now. You understand that. I understand. Brielle held his gaze. But so do you. This war we're about to fight for Yunwoo, for whatever this is between us, I'm not going to lose. Outside, morning light painted the Manhattan skyline gold. Inside, the battle lines were drawn. The cage door swung shut with a soft, final click. And Brielle Washington walked deeper into the darkness, her eyes wide open, ready for war. So Brielle chose war. She chose the monster. She chose the cage. And Daehyun? He just realized he's not the only one with power anymore. If this story has you hooked, if you need to know whether Brielle can actually pull this off, smash that subscribe button right now. Hit the notification bell so you don't miss what comes next, because the real battle is just beginning. Comment below, Team Brielle or Team Daehyun? Who's winning this war? I'm reading every single comment. And if you made it this far, you're my kind of person. Thank you for being here. Thank you for investing in this story. The darkness is only going to get deeper from here.
See you in the next chapter.